Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raccoon, and I hope that your week has started well. I want to bring a quick book tag on this Tuesday evening. It's going to be the Booker Bingo Tag. It was originally created by Bob the Bookerer, and you do not need to be a Booker Prize enthusiast the way he is to appreciate these different prompts. He's reading all the different books that make the short list for going back to 1969 and then putting videos up about it. But he also has a deep appreciation for experimental fiction. He has a very, very excellent two-part series on that. So I'll link those videos along with the original tag video in the description box below. But let's jump in. Prompt 1, the Hilary Mantel, a highly praised author who you think deserves the hype. Mantel certainly does. Wolf Hall was amazing. My copy has like stains from orange juice being spilled all over it while I was reading while eating. But I'm going to go with two authors. One is the great Toni Morrison. Most recently I read Tar Baby from her novels. I'm probably going to read Jazz next. Looking forward to that. And I think of Morrison as the writer who most recently was like sort of elevating what fiction can be, what stories can be, what narratives can be, how we use language to perceive our world, but also each other, and whose stories we focus on, why we tell stories, like why stories matter. She was the writer who I think was really like advancing that discussion and the example of what a book could be, what a novel could be. The other one for me though would be Beverly Cleary, the late Beverly Cleary. Just her humor was infectious when I was in grade school. I loved her books. My wife did too, and we were reminiscing about this at the dinner table. Kind of across the past like week, 2 weeks, and I still make Donzer jokes. If you get that, let me know in the comments. Prompt 2, the Beryl Bridesmaid, a book or author who you think is often overlooked and deserves a lot more praise and attention. Well, I have again two. One for sort of either side. So an author who I think gets neglected in terms of sort of like praise is Elmore Leonard. Very popular writer, but somebody who I think a lot of, I think there's a lot of readers who don't appreciate just what a thorough researcher he was as a writer. And he would use research teams to help him, particularly as he became more successful. But he was a very, very thoughtful and meticulous researcher in developing his writing. He could write crackerjack dialogue. He had great, action as plots move, but he gives us, sides of Detroit, of Atlantic City, of southwestern, southern Arizona and New Mexico that you just don't find in other fiction. And so he has these propulsive narratives that also are very immersive in the worlds where they exist. And I think that's something that a lot of readers don't appreciate. They don't think they think he was just sort of this popular writer who's just dashing works off. The other side of that would be sort of an obscure work that nobody reads, and that would be Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a brilliant long narrative poem from Middle English. This edition was translated by Burton Raffel and might have one of the most ridiculous and hideous covers of any book I own. It looks like some bad sea creature. But this is a brilliant, brilliant work. And if you can enjoy Middle English, it's also very readable in Middle English. It's semi-contemporary to like Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales, and it works. It works on, as a narrative, it's interesting, but it also has deep symbolism that it maintains throughout. And it is just a marvelous book. It's anonymous, so when I wrote it on my list of I have my books I read and who they're by, if I recall correctly, I wrote something like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight by some wizard from North England or something like that, because I was just amazed. Prompt 3, the new voice, an author who is still quite new into their career who you think more people should discover. I'll go with Peter Shelley Clark, whose The Black God's Drums was one of my favorite books I read this year. My wife also read this book afterwards and just absolutely loved it. And, I will add that Peter Shelley Clark, one of the print anthologies he's been published in is called Steam Funk. Definitely check it out. Prompt 4, The Offshore, an unexpected gem of a book that took you by surprise but that you love. And, so many to choose from. One that both my wife and I love is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafon. I don't even remember how I picked this up. I think it was just in the Z section at a used bookstore, and there aren't too many writers in the Z section. So when you see something, you're like, oh, that's somebody new. It sort of stands out. Love this. I've reread it a couple of times. It's one of my favorite books, and one of her favorite books. Another one that was just very random was the Poems of the Late Tang And while it's in this Penguin Classics, I believe NYRB Classics also has published the same translation notes, and it's a fantastic insight into a generation of poetry that I knew nothing about, a culture I knew nothing about within ancient China, and I loved it. I loved the symbolism and imagery. It was so powerful. And then one last one, just the crime novel enthusiast in me, would be The Dead Are Discreet by Arthur Lyons, a writer I had never heard of, and someone who very much sort of picks up the torch from Raymond Chandler and Ross MacDonald and then just takes it in kind of a weird direction. Prompt 5, The Pre-Booker. A book released before 1969 that you think deserves all of the awards. That would comprise much of my reading. But I will go with The Life and Opinions of Tristram, Shandy, Gentleman by Laurence Sterne. Not just a pre-Booker, but one of the early novels. One of the early novels in the English language. And such a weird, unclassifiable, strange book. It is all over the place. It is an unholy and holy mess. And I love it. I love this book. It is one of my favorite books. It's one of the funniest books I've ever read. And Bob's an enthusiast of experimental novels. This was experimental because there weren't many novels to use for your frame of reference. Prompt 6, The Iris Murdoch, who also has a book that has intertextuality with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I'm just saying. It's the first book of hers I read. The Black Prince and the Sea are also excellent by Iris Murdoch. An author who you want to check out more from, but you are intimidated by how many books they have written. Not anymore. But there was a time where Ursula K Le Guin was one of those writers like that for me, where she had, books like The Left Hand of Darkness, which were, legendary in terms of being some of the greatest science fiction, and not just great science fiction, but some of the most insightful books written in the 20th century. But she has not just this, but the whole Hainish series with this. There's Earthsea, there's Orsinia, there's just so much. And I think a lot of science fiction writers can feel that way, where they produce so many works. But once I sort of, started playing in the snow with The Left Hand of Darkness, I realized this was a writer to pay attention to, and someone who, I've just gradually just consumed her books. I love them. Prompt 7, The International Prize, a book in translation that you think deserves love. It is something I'm still currently reading. The Shahnameh, The Persian Book of Kings by Ferdowsi. Absolutely brilliant. Just an astonishing book. This translation is by Dick Davis, and it has quickly become one of my favorite books, not just, from sort of the classical times or the Middle Ages, or, however, before modern novels and literature. It's just amazing and wonderful and so enjoyable to read. Prompt 8, The Judging Panel. If you could choose another booktuber to be on a judging panel with you for any prize, who would you choose and why? Well, the Booker has, 5 judges? I think they have an odd number. I don't follow it quite as closely as others. A couple of people I would choose. Michael K. Vaughan and I have very similar tastes, but they diverge just enough that I think it would be interesting. We would sort of be the two sides of the same coin who would then have a fierce discussion. So I think that could be fun. Elizabeth from Bookish North posted one of the finest videos, most insightful videos I've ever watched for Sagalong this past weekend. And I just feel like I would learn a lot. That would be one of those, be quiet and listen to somebody else share their ideas, and you're going to learn a lot. And that would be really fun to be on a panel where you're learning. You're not just there to be an elitist. A couple of commenters who I think would be really fun to have, because their comments are just so insightful. That would be Hester Dunlop and Stephanie Cohen. I would be remiss if I did not say that I think it would be really fun to be on one of these judging panels with my wife. In part, again, because we have very similar tastes, but we also have these divergence, these flashpoints that we diverge on, and that could be interesting. And then, of course, Noah from Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse. He'd probably be he'd be having some fun on that panel with us. Prompt 9, The Drama. What is a book that you are so passionate about that you would defend it vigorously if you were judging a prize? And it will be an actual Booker Prize winner. That would be Possession by A.S. Byatt. Again, one of my all-time favorite books. It's something that my wife and I have been talking about as we've been doing our sort of, we read a book together every year as a couple and discuss it. And the book we were reading has certain epistolary features, you know, and just a love and appreciation for texts and research and libraries that is a hallmark of Possession, and part of the reason it's one of my favorite books. So that is the Booker Bingo Tag. Have a great week.